What's going on, everybody? Welcome into my Western Conference standings predictions. Earlier today, I dropped my Eastern Conference standings predictions, so go check those out, then come back and watch these, if you want to, if you feel like it. If you just want to watch the West, that's completely fine with me as well. Before we jump into the predictions, I have something different to plug almost every single video. So in today's intro, I am plugging channel memberships. Hit the join button below to become a channel member. This season we're going to be doing weekly film breakdowns over on a third channel. We're going to break down game footage. I'm going to look at sets, I'm going to look at schemes, and I'm going to do that once a week, dropping every weekend. Those will only be available to channel members. The lowest channel member tier is only $2 a month. There are other perks as well that I just updated, so go check those out. And if you become a channel member, I greatly appreciate it. Now, let's jump into the 5 teams in the Western Conference that I don't have making the playoffs or a play-in spot. To start things off, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder with a record of 17-65. This is a team with a lot of intriguing young players, and they do have a pretty good top guy in SGA. Lou Dort is there as well. You got Josh Giddey looking good in preseason, so good for him, but I just think this is a team that is going to lose a ton of games in a stacked Western Conference and have a lot of pieces that don't make much sense next to each other. They don't have enough shooting in their starting lineup. This is the least talented team in the West as well, so I have them coming in at 15. At 14, I have the San Antonio Spurs. They finally hit the rebuild button. They finally let DeRozan walk, and they'll finally be bad enough to hopefully get a top 5 pick in the draft and just start things fresh for them. They won for a long time. Now they're going to lose this year. 23-59 is their record. You got DeJounte Murray. You got a lot of guards there. You got some guys that might break out in Keldon Johnson and Lonnie Walker. So if some of those younger pieces break out, then maybe they're a little bit better than this. However, I don't think they should really want to be. At 13, I have the Houston Rockets with a record of 24-58. Jalen Green is my leading candidate for Rookie of the Year. I think he'll be terrific off the bat. He's a fun guy to watch. You got some talent there as well. You got Christian Wood. You got Kevin Porter Jr. John Wall's still there. So this is actually a decently talented 13 seed in the West. This is a team that, if everything's clicking on any given night, could give some better teams in the league some trouble. At 12, I have the New Orleans Pelicans with a record of 35-47. We'll see if Zion can play heavy minutes and stay healthy. The report on him is not promising in that regard because it seems like he's prioritizing frat parties instead of becoming the best player he can be, but he's still a pretty dang good player coming off a season in which he averaged 27 points per game. You got Brandon Ingram there as well. They let Lonzo Ball walk for Devontae Graham, which didn't make a ton of sense to me, but they did switch out Steven Adams for Valanciunas, who is an upgrade at center, but I think they needed to go after a stretch 5 to play next to Zion, and Valanciunas can shoot some threes, but probably not at the rate they should have been looking for. So this is a team with a main guy who doesn't seem committed and has some injury question marks, and that is why I have them coming in at 12. They have a lot of talent, they just got to put it together, but I don't think they're going to be a playoff or a play-in team. At 11, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who is the favorite sleeper team of many as we head into the season. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Some people in our community do. Reese. I have them with a record of 36-46. Karl Anthony Towns is going to have a big season in my opinion, and under Chris Finch, who they hired as their head coach in the middle of last season, they actually look like a pretty good team. So that's the logic behind them making a jump. Is under Chris Finch, they were using Cat like a playmaker and it was working really well, and they were better defensively. Cat doesn't seem like a guy who should struggle as much as he does defensively. Maybe he just needed the right coach to help him figure out that end of the floor. If he becomes a good defender and they utilize his playmaking potential properly, then he's a candidate for best center in the league. Anthony Edwards has supposedly grown 2 inches. We'll see if he takes the jump into stardom. And you got D'Angelo Russell, so that's their big 3. Beyond that, I just don't like the pieces that they have on the team. What else do they have beyond that? Naz Reid is a good backup center. The problem is their best player is also a center. And then you got a lot of weird pieces on that team. Pat Beverly is there, so good for them, I guess. That's maybe a guy that they needed. to be the heart and soul of their team. I guess they needed a heart and a soul, so Patrick Beverley comes in. They needed some defensive help, so he'll provide that, but I don't think it's going to be enough to get them into a playing spot. I have them at 11 with a 36-46 record. Now let's jump into playing teams, starting with the 10th place team. I have the Memphis Grizzlies taking a slight step back, going 41-41, flat 500 record for the Grizz. You got John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. needs to take a jump in order for them to get into the top 8, and it's very possible. Jaren Jackson Jr. was injured last year, and then when he came back, he struggled, didn't have much of a rhythm. So if he's able to figure things out and be the Jaren Jackson Jr. that he was a couple of seasons ago, then that's a pretty dangerous team. I don't like trading Valanciunas for Steven Adams. That's a downgrade in terms of talent, and that's also a downgrade in terms of fit. And you have a lot of bigs there. I don't understand Steven Adams on this team. I'd almost just say play Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5, go a little smaller. They're a fast-paced team, so that makes sense. And you have more floor spacing, because that was kind of their problem last year. They couldn't shoot well enough, including John Morant. If he figures out his three-point shot, then he could just carry this team to a top 8 seed, because if he's able to knock down threes, he immediately becomes a top 20-ish player. At 9, I have the Sacramento Kings with a record of 43-39. I don't know why, but my gut says they're going to take a jump. I almost put them above the team that I have at 8. They just have to defend. They were worse than the Portland Trailblazers last year defensively, which is saying a lot. They were the worst defense in NBA history last year. It didn't make much sense because De'Aaron Fox should be a good defender. Tyrese Halliburton should be a good defender. He struggled in his rookie year. I expect him to take a jump in that regard. Harrison Barnes is looked at as an adequate defender. I don't know why they were so bad defensively last year. You look at their roster and it doesn't scream the worst defense in NBA history, but that's what they were. So I don't know if that's a Luke Walton problem or what, but I think that they improve a little bit defensively this year, and that's the thing. They were still competitive in a lot of games last year despite how much they struggled defensively. They're a good offensive team, so if they're able to figure some things out defensively, this could be a sleeper team to make it into the top 8. At 8, I have the overrated Dallas Mavericks with a 44-38 record. I am not buying the hype around Dallas. They downgraded. They lose JJ Redick to retirement. They trade away Josh Richardson for nothing. They lose Rick Carlisle and bring in Jason Kidd, of all people. Those 3 moves alone make this team worse. I know that they re-signed Tim Hardaway Jr. They already had him. They brought in Reggie Bullock at $10 million a year. That's not a difference maker. Neither is Sterling Brown. Neither is Frank Ntilikina. Neither is anybody else they brought in. They are not going to be as good as people think because they didn't get better in the coaching department, in my opinion, and the roster got worse. So I don't see how they don't get worse. At 7, I have the Golden State Warriors with a record of 48-34. That's a pretty good record for the 7 seed. I think there's a clear-cut top 7. The issue with the Warriors is, when will Klay Thompson return, and what will he be when he returns? Right now, he's expected to be back around Christmas time. They aren't a good team without him. They are a mediocre team without him. Jordan Poole looked great in his first preseason game. We'll see if he can take a jump this year. Maybe he can hold things out until Klay Thompson is back. Maybe he can kind of play that role for them. They're going to need somebody to step up because they haven't really had that in years past. Draymond Green isn't as effective if he's not playing next to both Steph and Klay, and his shot has fallen off a cliff in the past few years. So this is a team that I think will start slow, and then once they get Klay back, they'll have to kind of work him in, and Klay's probably not going to have too much of a rhythm, but the dude is such a pure shooter, he might come back and shoot 45% from 3. I don't know. This is going to be a team that's a lot more dangerous in the postseason than they are the first 2 months of the season. So I don't think they'll necessarily have a great seed, but if they finish 7th, they're going to be a dangerous 7th seed. And that's where I have them with a record of 48-34. At 6, I have the Los Angeles Clippers with a record of 48-34. And as I'm saying this, I feel like I might be slightly overrating the Clippers. However, they made it to a Western Conference Finals and beat the Jazz without Kawhi. They're going to be without Kawhi all year. We'll see if they're performance without him in the playoffs last year was a fluke, or if that is something that they can sustain over an entire 82-game regular season. I think they mostly can. I don't think they're going to be an elite team. Some people still have them in the top 4. I can't do that. I feel like 48 wins might even be a little high for them. You got Paul George. He's going to have a great year, and I think he probably will, but if he struggles a little bit, then it's going to be hard for them to win games. They lost Patrick Beverley and brought in Eric Bledsoe, and he's supposedly going to start, and now I really feel bad about having them here, and I feel like I'm overrating them even more now. I don't know. It's a weird team. Terrence Mann took a jump in the playoffs last year. He'll have to take another one. They just need another guy that can step up and create shots for himself and others offensively, and that guy is probably going to be Terrence Mann. At 5, I have the Denver Nuggets, who will be playing all season without Jamal Murray. They overpaid Michael Porter Trashcan. They overpaid Aaron Gordon, and their backcourt is still mediocre without Murray. I know the Blazers' defense last year made their backcourt look much better than it was in the playoffs. However, they don't get to play the Terry Stotts-led Blazers every game of the year. So they'll still be a good team led by last year's MVP Nikola Jokic. However, I'm not a big fan of their depth. I don't think they got better this offseason. They lost JaVale McGee and they lost Paul Millsap and brought in Jeff Green. I think that's some lateral movement there. So at 5 is definitely the spot for the Denver Nuggets in my opinion. At 4, I have the Utah Jazz winning 53 games, losing 29. I think they'll take a slight step back this season. Not a big step back, but I don't think they're going to be the 1 seed again. I feel like the blueprint to beating the Utah Jazz was laid out by the Los Angeles Clippers, because that's the thing. The Clippers took care of them without Kawhi, and the Jazz were pretty much healthy. The Jazz were a great defensive team last year, but the Clippers were able to get high-quality shots without their top offensive player. I think a lot of teams will try and do what the Clippers did in that playoff series last season during the regular season this year, and the Jazz will be fine. They'll still be one of the better defenses in the league, still be one of the better offenses in the league. They still have a really good roster, and I think it's a decently coached roster as well. They're a top 4 team for sure. I don't have them above 4. At 3, I have my Portland Trail Blazers. Scream biased all you want, I don't care. They won the equivalency of 48 games last year, and they were not a well-coached team. They fixed that problem. They also were playing a combination of Carmelo Anthony and Enes Kanter off the bench at the 4 and 5 spots. Horrible defensively. They fixed that. They brought in Larry Nance Jr. and Cody Zeller. They were terrific with Norman Powell on the team. They traded for him at last year's trade deadline. Now they'll have him for an entire season. They also missed Yusuf Nurkic for half the season. They missed CJ McCollum for about 25 games. So they weren't healthy either. Despite all that, they finished tied for 5th in the West with the equivalency of a 48-win record on an 82-game season. So I expect them to take a bump in terms of wins. Dame is determined this year, maybe more determined than ever, and that's scary for the league. I don't see how people can say this team is going to get worse and be the 7th or the 8th seed. I just don't buy that. I think those people aren't paying enough attention. I think the Blazers are a potential 1 seed, actually. And if anybody said that about the Utah Jazz going into last season, you would have called them crazy, and then the Jazz went out and got the 1 seed. I think the Blazers are kind of in that same boat. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think they'll be a top 4 team. However, they are a candidate to have a Jazz-like jump in production this year. At 2, I have Los Angeles Lakers winning 54 games, losing 28. Russell Westbrook is an overrated acquisition. I don't like a lot of their role players. Carmelo Anthony, if he starts, the rest of the league is going to be happy about that. Trevor Ariza's now out for 8 weeks. And you got Kendrick Nunn and Malik Monk. Those guys can shoot the 3 and do a little bit off the dribble. They're both pretty bad defensively. LeBron's another year older. He's starting to have some injury issues. Anthony Davis has always had injury issues. I expect at least one of those guys to miss some time. That's the thing. If they don't have one of those guys, this is a very mediocre team and a team that probably doesn't make the playoffs. With all those guys, I think it's a good regular season team that might run into some trouble in the playoffs because I don't think their fit is cohesive enough to be unexploitable in a playoff series. I don't like the way that Westbrook fits on this team. He's not good enough to be the number 1, but his style of play does not fit as the number 2 or the number 3. Don't get me wrong, Westbrook raises their floor, but he doesn't raise their ceiling at all. And at number 1, I have the Phoenix Suns, the defending Western Conference champions, with a record of 56-26. I think they got a little bit better this past offseason. They lost Torey Craig, but they brought in Landry Shamet. They brought in JaVale McGee as their backup center. I think he's going to be a little bit of a difference maker for them. So I think they got a little bit better. They're a well-coached team. They're hungry after losing the finals in 6 games last season. They're going to be determined, and I think they are going to be the 1 seed. Anyway, that wraps up my Western Conference standings predictions. Let me know what your predictions are in the comment section below. And with that, I'm out of here. Make sure to catch Blazers Uprise live tonight, starting around 9:45 to 10 p.m. Pacific time. Eric's going to be a little bit late. He has a rec league game. I have a rec league game that's a little bit earlier, so I might have to kick things off without him. But we're going to be predicting standings. And by we, I'm talking about Eric, the mods, and me as well. You guys already know my standings predictions, but I will go more in depth in conversations with Eric on a lot of these teams. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. And with that, I'm out of here. Until I catch you next, peace out. Go Blazers.